a book from my bag to read something. Inside I found a drawing that disturbed me and probably will do so for the rest of my life. This picture that I found inside was most likely Laura's. It depicted a young boy in a large coat hanging down from the ceiling. He had on a sad expression with tears running down his face. It was even more horrific, considering it was made by a child. If the Yenga Towers falls, he gets strangled. When you lose, you kill him. I lost the other night. He sought out revenge. I have heard about messed up stuff that happened there in the past, but this fucked up? Kids killing kids in a way so sadistic? Always bury your dead, unless you want them to come back and haunt you. And just in case, give them their last rites and if necessary a baptism. If you can't, set the fucking thing on fire. And remember, there's always worse shit in the woods and in the waters. Especially water, since the old Slav underworld was underwater. Which is why you have a ton of scary shit come out from water, and almost all of it wants to murder your ass. Vetika, Vetice plural, translates as witches. Nobody bothered to give them a proper, unique, name because everyone usually stays the fuck away from those things. Think Baba Yaga, that's what those things are. All of them have their own small houses in the middle of nowhere. All of them live alone. All of them loathe people coming near them. And all of them are ancient, and still somehow in better shape than you. They never run out of wood and supplies needed for survival, even though you've never seen them buying shit or used to leave them gifts to appease them. Sometimes they'll even offer advice or if they're in good mood heal the sick. Probably the scariest part is that apparently anyone who reaches an old age and lives through some serious shit can become one of them. And if you live in vlog country, like I do, they can do magic. So they don't even have to be near you to fuck your shit up. All they need is a piece of string or a hair. And the moment they tie a knot into it, you're fucking dead. The place I grew up in actually had a story about the local witch. If you guys are interested I could story time. Okay, first some info about the place. The region is old. Ancient. One of the oldest Mesolithic settlements in Europe was found there, in a gorge made by the Danube River. That place was swept under the waves. Then the Romans came, declared the place the edge of their empire, built a huge bridge and a fortress there to defend against invaders. The bridge was also swept under the waves. Then the Turks came, and built a fortress there. Part of the fortress was swept away, and their graveyard ended up underwater. When the Second World War ended, the commies found several struggling villages in the gorge and decided to flood them in order to build a nearby dam. The waters are so treacherous that ship captains fucking dreaded going through the gorge if they didn't have a local with them. And because of how ridiculous the weather is, whenever there's rain or snow there are landslides and floods everywhere. A year or two ago, a massive landslide wrecked an entire town and laid bare a graveyard we didn't even know was there. And people report, almost every year, strange shit that the flood dug out from dead cows to monuments to who the fuck knows what. They had to stop a hydro plant turbine one time because dead shit was clogging it. I went in the woods with a couple of friends after a huge landslide, and we saw some weird sticks sticking out of the mud. We later realized those were the tops of the trees, buried under mud. You see the pattern. And of course, there are whirlpool everywhere. These tie with the story. I should really get to it, because according to the local legends, the white whirlpools are actually water devils. Because they were everywhere, the locals told their kids to stay away from the water, or at least not go deep. Each year there are a couple of drowned kids, usually drunk tourists who decide to go swimming in the night, but occasionally you end up with a drowned fisherman. Anyway, on to the rural legend. The story says that after World War II, the whole region was in absolute ruins. It was the place where the Russians crossed the border, so of course there was carnage everywhere. The local families fled for their lives ages ago, and were now coming back to what little remained of their homes. One of those families returns and finds that their grandma was still there, alive and kicking, and fucking angry. She told them to start working on the land, because she was tired from burying the dead with her own 2 hands. The family obliges, because some things clearly changed with grandma since they last saw her. For starters, she isn't dead. Time passes, Granny refuses to die. The family starts thinking about what to do in the future, and the granny suggests / orders that they'll open a butcher's shop. Where are we going to get the meat? They ask. She tells them not to worry about that, and comes back later that day with a slaughtered cow. And so on and on. Meanwhile, stories start popping up about whirlpools popping up out of nowhere, sudden drownings and monster sightings in the water. And each time someone notices something missing, the grandma would come up next day with fresh meat. So, her grandson and his best friend, kids at the time, decide to investigate these rumors. They follow grandma to the river, where she strips naked and starts chanting. Then the stench hits them, rotten, wet. And out of the waters, a humanoid figure emerges. A frog-like head on top of a human body. Pale green skin, huge bulbous eyes, rows upon rows of teeth. The Vlachs call it the water devil. The South Slavs call it vodnik. You've probably heard it being called Vodianoi. Grandma demands more meat, and the creature tells her, in a gurgle, how the deal is off. She was followed, and it wants those who followed her. The 2 kids start running away, with grandma chasing after them. Her skin now looks like tree bark, her eyes huge and bloodshot. Her limbs are twice the size they were before. She's screaming at them in an ungodly tongue. The works. She grabs her grandson, and realizes who spied on her. Apparently family ties are still important to these hags, and she lets him go. The kid returns home, fucking terrified, and his grandma is sitting there, waiting for him. The family business is over because of him. She can no longer provide food for them. They have to move to the next town and start over, because now everything in the water is after them. And because grandma told them to get the fuck away, they can't say no. Sam is still around. They still run a butcher's shop. And they're terrified of stepping near the waters, because they have an impressive death by drowning ratio. And that's the story about the local hag thing. Nah, those things are apparently horrifying. The father of a friend snapped during the war in the 90s. He came back, brought guns with him, including flicking grenades, and was generally the scariest motherfucker around. You always had this feeling of him being one word away from getting his guns and just going after you. His family was terrified of him. He'd storm into their apartment. They lived separated. Since the guy was a notorious drunk well before he was drafted. In his military fatigues, start waving his gun around, and demanded answers like, "Who are you flicking? Where are my kids? Are they eating well?" and stuff like that. You get the idea. The guy was also convinced that he saw paranormal shit out there during the war. Maybe it's stress, maybe shell shock, maybe alcoholism, who the fuck knows. He swore he saw something take the corpses of the fallen soldiers into the water. He opened fire at them, and that only made them angrier. The other solders in his squad apparently saw them too. They heard them screaming at them in the night. Sometimes they'd imitate other people, yelling for help or just lament loudly. Anyway, the guy died a couple of years ago. A flood hit, again, and the guy was caught outside of the city when the water reached him. Apparently he had a panic attack, started screaming about seeing them in the water, how they came back for him. He ran out of the car with a heavy chain. Apparently he and his friends were out salvaging shit from the nearby ditches, and tied himself to a tree. The people who were with him tried to help him, but the water was too strong. Some guy even ended up with a broken foot because something, probably a rock that the water was carrying, hit him in the leg and almost crushed it. They left him there, screaming at the water and tied up with chains. They came later for him. The guy was gone. All that remained was a bloody chain, and a huge pile of rocks that the water dragged along. They still haven't found his body.
Alright X, I have a story for you, so sit a while and listen. This takes place 3 summers ago during a boar hunting trip, down in a very rural area of the Ozark South. My main reasoning for sharing this here is that, ultimately, I don't believe in the paranormal. However, I believe I may have run across something that I couldn't explain, and I want some input. Fair warning, I'm no good at green text. However, I'm not going to assault you with a wall of text. In any case, enough pretense aside. Be back from college and wanting to get out into the woods. Be bored as fuck on a Friday night, and decide to head out super early for boar hunting with a buddy of mine, JD. He is an Eagle Scout, not prone to being spooked very easily, and I have been hunting in places ranging from deep south swamps to Alaska. We pack our shit up and leave his place around 12:30 a.m. After stopping for energy drinks and beef jerky, every hunter's best friends, we end up getting out there at around 2:15 a.m. We'd hunted this area for boar many times in the daylight, seen tons of deer, squirrels and even a baby fawn that fell asleep by the warmth of our car engine once. Basically, a nice place. We pull in off the gravel tract, 40 miles from town and 3 miles from a potting gas station deer check station. Decide not to fuck about in the woods at night. We'd had a mountain lion walk in our tracks on a previous hunting trip.